Okay, so today I'm talking about another spiritual pagan topic. I know I've made a bunch of those videos lately. It's just something I enjoy talking about. But today I'm specifically talking about my own use of tarot cards. I'm gonna actually grab those real quick. Okay, I've got them. They're in a very, very ugly box because I had a very pretty box that they came in, and that got shredded immediately, especially since I often take them with me in different places, like in nature to use them, or like if I'm going anywhere. But yeah, the pretty packaging got very damaged very quickly. But I have here, I've got like a very classic deck. I forgot what it's called, but it's like the classic deck that you imagine for tarot cards. I specifically wanted these because I think they are very pretty. And I also feel like I like also the visuals and symbolism in them and how it's integrated. So, yeah. Actually, in the beginning, when I started using them, I was very, very secretive about them, especially with people who I didn't know very well, or with Christians. For obvious reasons. Because they tend to be suspicious of him. Actually, my mother is actually very worried about him, or used to be. Anyway. But now I'm going to talk about how I use them. So one thing I've already mentioned in my video about the gods I worship is that I use them to communicate with Aphrodite, and also with the gods in general, because it's just a very simple and I think quite direct way to, well, not direct, but easier to interpret and to read way of communicating with the gods. But Aphrodite is definitely the one who likes that form of communication most, from my experience with my gods. I also have previously used it for in the traditional way of pulling for past, future, and present, which is obviously not directly directed at any specific god, but it is generally, to me, channeled through Apollo, since he's the god of divination and such. But it is a very different thing. Like, I think Apollo, to me anyways, prefers divining through tarot over communicating through tarot. So yeah, I also think that what is somewhat of a popular view of tarot as directly predicting what's gonna happen in the future is kind of a wrong way to look at it, to me. And it's more like advice and thought-provoking for these different things. Basically, a card for the past is a way that you maybe should look at and think about your past and think about how things happened and such. Then for the present, it is basically, to me, in general, tarot to me is advice from the gods, basically, to those different aspects. So as we've been talking about, it's advice as to how to look at the past, or a possible way to look at the past, or a consideration. Then for present, it's some guiding a possible direction or possible actions that could help you in the moment, or actually also kind of looking at your current situation in a different way. Like, for example, it's kind of difficult to explain actually, but if it's like the moon, for example, which is about truth and deception, depending on if you pull it upright or reversed, of course, but then you might want to see about like what's truthful in your life, or where you might be lying or conceiving something from yourself, or if someone else actually has good intentions for you. It's just a way to think about what is currently your situation. And then for the future, it is kind of, to me, a preparation, like a little bit of knowledge of what to expect. Like, for example, something that I did when I did such a reading for myself, and I usually do them for myself, very early on. For the future, I got the death card, and I think it was reversed. I don't remember the details. But it basically, with some also communication with the gods and stuff, and with my intuition, which I do it very intuition based. I'm gonna get into that more later. But felt like something big was gonna end, something that I was very focused on was gonna end. That was basically my interpretation of it. Basically an end to something that is currently that was in that moment currently very important or central to me. And that did happen because the band I had been in broke apart shortly after that. So yeah, that's an example just of like how these cards can like not really warn you of something, and they aren't specific, but can kind of prepare you for roughly what you can expect. And sometimes also guidance of how to deal with it, or to make, or like sometimes it tells you to make sure to embrace the things that happen, or to be prepared to ask for help, or depending on the card, obviously, and on the reading. But yeah, it's basically like preparing you to have to be ready in a certain way, and that way can also be to just not overthink it and let it wash over you. Sometimes that is also it. So yeah, that's how that kind of thing works for me. And then when I do more specific readings, like a love reading or something like that, for more like specific topics, I do tend to specifically try to call on a god, ideally one of the ones I worship, but not always, who is related to that. So if I'm doing a love reading, I would call on Aphrodite in addition to Apollo, since it is still something to help me with the future and how to move on. So it's still a part of divination, so I tend to then call on both. Now, to go into more specifics about how exactly I read tarot cards and what my process with it is, I'm gonna actually make a part 2 for this video, because it's already long enough, and describing how I actually practically use tarot and how I personally read the cards and interpret the cards is gonna take a little longer. So I'm gonna make a part 2 for this. So yeah, see you in part 2.